So, this is what the AI, specifically YouTube's AI, thinks of or generates from so many submissions of dogs and other animals of what an elderly black lab looks like, or just an elderly dog in general. And um, this makes me think about deeper connotations and other implications um, concerning intelligence and cognizance, and even the cloning of animals or designer babies. The thing about dogs is that they produce puppies. That's right, you can be a dog breeder just by putting a male and a female dog in close proximity to each other, and they both happen to have their genitals intact. And given enough time, they will produce puppies. Guaranteed. You can even make a business out of it. And it makes me think about Bob Barker, right? In the Humane Society and so on and so forth. Please, spay and neuter your pets. Honestly, um, there are so many dogs and cats out there. It's mind blowing, and the cruelty that people show to man's best friends, specifically the animals that we have domesticated, is just it's just unbelievable, and just the neglect, not like from like people that are looking to rehome their animals, or that just fall in hard times and they can no longer look after their pets, but the people that purposefully um don't train their dogs, don't want to, and then don't, like, even give them the basic needs of what a dog should have, all things considered, even though a dog is a descendant from the Canis family, so that being of wolves and coyotes. They are dependent upon humans. They're uh symbiotic with us. It's not like you just get a dog and everything's okay. No, it's not that you just get a dog. You get a personality. You get a friend. And then that friend sticks around for years and years and years. And you have to feed it, you have to walk it, you have to nurture it like a child. And the dog remains a child until its old and dying days. And so I've thought about this a lot recently, and more or less today, like a couple of days after I just took my elderly Labrador, and she's around 17 years old, to the vet. and I care for her with my sister. And my mother is the one that purchased and acquired the dog for her companionship. But she is a member of my family, even though there's been events in my family that have seriously changed its composition. And some people no longer live in this house, and other people do. But the dog still remains. Like, she didn't just pack up her stuff and move to a new city. And I think that if the dog had a choice, she wouldn't have anyway. And so that makes me think of, the dog baby thing, and in millennials or whatever young people were doing at the time, and just not having children and having dogs instead, because the sentiment was that, we can't afford to have children, but we can afford to have a dog. A dog's a lot easier to take care of, but in reality, they're not. Children, in my opinion, are no harder to look after than a dog. And if you can't look after a dog, then you shouldn't look after a child. If you can't, this is my opinion, if you can not look after a dog and sustain the life of a dog unsupervised and without someone, um, pushing you along to motivate you to do something about the dog, then you should not have a dog. Maybe you shouldn't even have a cat. I think that if you get too preoccupied with the feelings surrounding the responsibilities, and you have preoccupations with, oh, how much of X is a burden for Y, and for Z equals something, right? A cost benefit analysis as to why you should have another living being in your life. I've had dogs life, my entire life, right? I've had 4 dogs. Some people out there have had 40 dogs in their lives. They run a shelter or they run a rescue or something along those lines. Some people have had 10. And some people have, 2 or 3 dogs at once. And if they can handle it, you know what? Okay, fine. Right? It's not a burden to have a dog. It's a blessing. And there can be a lot of feelings associated with having a puppy, and then a friend, and then a friend that grows old in front of you, and then they can no longer do the things that you could do with the dog before. And this is from my own experience, but as soon as my own dog became around the age, she to around 7 or 8 years old, she was no longer a working dog, right? She was no longer out in the fields running with me, or on the trails in the woods running with me on my bicycle. She just couldn't keep up anymore. She couldn't do 15 kilometers per hour, but she could still go for walks and swim and stuff like that. And so that's how we treated her until more recently, in which we were trying to figure out what was causing her to be in pain and why she was losing mobility. And eventually, I will have to let go of this furry friend. This is something I've tried to mentally prepare myself for. Um, because, eventually it will happen. Eventually, my four-legged friends will have to go to forever land. She'll have to go off to heaven. And I don't like thinking about that when I look at her. I want her to live out her days as naturally as possible without that intervention. And that brings up the question, when is it time to let go of the dog? When is it time to move on from such a thing? From a being that was with you for 17 years, whether you liked it or not. Because that's the part of having an animal that we don't always talk about as as a culture, is that dogs can be really annoying, and they can be mischievous. They can be manipulative, and they can be aggressive. They can actually even be malicious at times. They have emotions, they have moods and desires and personalities. Yeah, and that makes me come back to one of the first things I said in this recording, in that people who clone their dogs, I think that's kind of strange. I understand the attachment, I do, but at the same time, there's no guarantee that it's going to be the same dog, even though the genetics are the same. And the same thing was commented on and observed from designer babies, in which the parents had selected certain genetic traits from the ovum after a DNA analysis, for which was were or sorry for which were predictors of a certain personality and character traits, if not intelligence. It's like you're picking a certain breed of dog. Yeah. But then you get a water dog that wants to be a runner, and you get a running dog that wants to be a water dog. It's really fascinating to me that every single one of these uh excuse me, just about to yawn. Every one of these canines is different from each other. I could keep going on to all the wonderful things that have been said about dogs over over the years, or that have been written or even portrayed on screen or in paintings or drawings. And I have to say, I've seen how popular it is and even profitable to create works of art in the likeness of people's pets. I I don't necessarily want to do that as a way of making a living. I have far more lucrative ways of earning a living, in my opinion, that are much more predictable and reliable than betting on an image that will set me free from the shackles of the drafting table. At some point, you just have to go out and walk the dog. There's no avoiding it. I mean, what's it that the tail wags the dog or something like that? And again, what time is it to let go of the dog? I think when the dog no longer has that spark of life in its eyes, when it no longer wants to participate, or is in constant pain, even with medication, in which all of the solutions for which we can provide for the dog as a living creature are no longer enough. I think that's the ethical point at which you say goodbye to the animal. Not because you can't, or because you won't let go, but because the dog knows that it's time to go. I'm not ready to do that for my dog, and I don't think she is either.